And we are live. I should have learned my lesson on keeping it positive and avoiding mummy's curses because as Gwendolyn and I were getting ready, you could read between the lines about what I was talking about. Maybe something I didn't like so much, maybe something associated with curses. And Gwendolyn's webcam was paying the price of that. But we're all good. Welcome to Nighttime Logic. Curses be damned. It is Monday, April the 20th, the year 2026. Nighttime Logic is the part of the story that is felt but not necessarily consciously processed. I've remembered to introduce myself. My name is Daniel Braum. I am your host. My most recent book is a book of ghost stories and strange tales called Phantom Constellations. And before I introduce our wonderful guest, I want to shout out to another podcast host that I think both of us are really fond of, Scotty Milder, host of Horror from the High Desert podcast, who's a friend of this podcast and a friend of we authors here. And I always forget to shout him out. So please do check out Scotty's work, Scotty's podcast. Today's guest is Gwendolyn Kiste, author of the just released The Haunted Houses she calls her own. Let me introduce Gwendolyn and we'll get to talking about these excellent stories. Gwendolyn Kiste is the 4-time Bram Stoker Award-winning author of The Haunting of Velkwood, The Rust Maidens, Reluctant Immortals, Bone Set and Feathers, and Pretty Marys all in a row, among others. Her short fiction and nonfiction have appeared in outlets including Nightmare, Best American Science Fiction and Fantasy, Torn Nightfire, Titan Books, and The Dark. She's a Lambda Literary Award winner, and her fiction has also received the This Is Horror Award for Novel of the Year. Originally from Ohio, she now resides on an abandoned horse farm outside of Pittsburgh with her husband, their excitable calico cat, and not nearly enough ghosts. Welcome back to the program, Gwendolyn. It's always great to see you. How are you? How is the book launching going for you?
Very well, other than like weird camera issues. So hopefully everything will be okay. I've got it on
we almost had the purple edition tonight, which in the scheme of things could be so much worse. Let's I love this book. Before we just start talking about these stories, if you, to our viewers out there, just stop everything. If you haven't, most viewers of the program, Gwendolyn's been a recurring guest, so you should know her, you should know her work. But if you don't, here's the book. Go out and grab it in an ebook, grab it from your favorite big box bookstore, buy it from your favorite indie store. And it's such a great overview and introduction to Gwendolyn's work. But if you're a longtime fan and a completist, it'll be like your new favorite crown jewel. So just congratulations on a fantastic book. I'm so into this book. Let's talk about some of the stories, the first stories. And I just love your titles as well. You're not afraid to have a juicy title. You're not afraid to have a long title. I like long titles too. I was once scarred by a colleague of mine who in a non-positive way once said, your titles are like a 70s Yes album title. And I was just like, compliment, but I don't think you mean it that way. Your titles are like a 70s Yes album, but in the best of ways, Gwendolyn. And I'm talking about A New Mother's Guide to Raising an Abomination. And this story, to me, on the first glance, it started out, and we knew it wasn't going to hold. It started out as just being like, yeah, this is a new mother doing all the things a new mother does when she has a child. And then you just very slowly like escalated it with like, except someone's bringing some gifts of dead things, and then, let's get our first glimpse at the baby and her scales and wings. So it's just like this great, like for us horror people, we're like, yeah, Gwendolyn wasn't gonna give us a mom and baby story. We knew that. But we know it was going to be a horror story. We got the child goes into a cocoon, the child ages, And then we're in the zone when the mother says, "Have fun, baby," as when the baby proceeds to kill her father. And
Spoiler.
we're gonna be full of some good spoilers, but here, so spoiler warning on this one. But that's where the story. So I would have been perfectly satisfied with that. That's all the ingredients for a perfectly satisfying, excellent horror story right there. But that's really just the beginning. Like the story has this wonderful afterburner where so then at that point, like you're just like, oh, I've seen it all, and it's a demon baby and it kills the father. Like, yeah, we've seen it, we love it. But the mother and baby, they leave home and they go out and they join a society of other daughters and mothers just like her. I want to point out a great line when I think the mother is talking about the leader of this cult or gathering. She says, "Men like him always think they're in control. They're so wrong." And you're definitely in a Gwendolyn Kiste story because it escalates. Even you think, how much further can this escalate? It gets apocalyptic, and there's this great last line of so I won't go full spoiler. The great last line of the story that feels like a bridge and a callback to your first short story collection. And her smile will untether the universe. It's just a hell of an ending, a hell of a last line. So from the question, I spoke a lot. Thanks everyone for bearing with me. But the story operates as a great flip to this reader as on the theme of the other, of the alternate, and how they do or don't or can or can't operate in this mainstream world. What was your approach to presenting that theme and just theme in your work?
Yeah. Othering and the other is like outsiders and outcasts in general are such a huge part of my writing and of my stories. And with this one in particular, just the idea that this little like monster baby is born and she kind of just wants to like live her little monster baby life, but no one is letting her do that. And her mom's even like, okay, I had a monster baby. She's like a lot cooler with it than anybody else, but everyone else is really having. So I liked the idea of kind of exploring, like, we've seen monster babies, we've seen that, but I like the idea of what if a monster baby's literally just wanting to mind its own business and like nobody would let the monster baby do that. And so this story first appeared in a David Cronenberg inspired anthology. So there's like definitely inspirations from The Brood. There's like a little bit of The Fly in there. There's some Dead Ringers. But The Brood in particular, I really was coming from this idea of like, what if the monster children from The Brood weren't actually trying to kill everybody? Like, what if they just really wanted to mind their own business? And like, it becomes a very, very different story then. Like, we're used to the monsters trying to go after people, but if the monsters are just trying to live their life, I like the idea of exploring that and seeing where it goes from there. So yeah, that was really kind of the idea of like how to approach the other in this case, of just like the other just wants to be left alone, but the world's like, no, we don't like you. And it's like, well, then there's going to be an apocalypse. I'm sorry, I didn't want this.
Right? It's like, you just want to be left alone, but take one apocalypse if you can't do that simple thing. And it's it's so smooth. It just works out so perfectly. It's such a great way to start it off. And it's both its own thing. It's like, yeah, we've all seen monster baby stories before and we like that, but it's like you really did explore it really really well. So it has that wonderful zone of like habitable planets where it's like, yeah, it still feels comfort in the same, yet it still feels really new and fresh. And that is no easy task to make that, to pull that off. And moving right along to there's just one banger of a great story after another here. I'm like going to be repeating myself here. So the next story, the girls from the horror movie, it's the next story, and I found this to be such a cool reflection on an examination and glance at the horror movie industry. And again, it has this sort of thing where it feels familiar and it feels like it's delivering that, yet it also goes into such wild and original new places. So my take on the movie was, yeah, it had real verisimilitude on like the horror convention. We have an aging child star, and she had a part in a horror movie, and she's there, selling the 8x10 photos of herself, and you're just like, oh, poor dear, like we've all felt that way. And she has a twin sister, and that there's a lot of verisimilitude in that, because we all, we know that's how they dealt with the child thing, to deal with the labor laws and safety and all that. And one of the twins wants this big break in stardom, and the other twin is really holding the emotional heart of the story, and she just is like, oh, I just want us to be okay and to be together. And but there's a supernatural aspect there. We get the sense that this is a cursed movie. We get the sense that this movie, we're told that this movie has its own supernatural agenda, and there's also like this really crazy secret backstory of what happened to the sisters, and it all comes to a head as a screening of this film. I Once upon a time, I went, this might be 20 or 30 years ago already. I think I was at a Dawn of the Dead reunion in that mall, and
Yes.
God, it was in the 90s, and that's where I got like the verisimilitude of that. Like I went there, and it was like Romero didn't show up, and the actors all felt sad, and that's just where I had like the and I know you're a Pennsylvania person, so
Yeah.
wanted to mention that. What is so?
I'm going to interrupt you real quick, because in writing this story, I had done conventions when I was still a horror filmmaker at the Monroeville Convention Center next to the mall. And in my mind, that was where I was writing it for. So I love that you're like, that was where you were imagining it, because that was where I was imagining it.
Oh
so
my
that's
God.
like
It totally
little detail.
Like, I was, of course, like a slacker and lost. And like me and my poor friends drove up to that mall like in the middle of the night because we were lost and it was foggy, and we were sort of like pulled up on the mall like at like 4 a.m, like, all right, there it is. There's the mall.
There's
like,
the mall.
What's your take? So what's your take on your experiences and lives of these people at these conventions?
Interesting, because I think some people who go to the horror conventions just really enjoy it, and the actors, and it's just something fun for them. And I think it's like a way of making some extra money, and they have a good time with it. And so with that, I'm like, that's cool. But I agree, there are some people that I feel sad for, because I think sometimes they're still hoping for that big break that's probably not going to come from one of those horror conventions. It's almost more of a fan convention than anything. And so it's kind of like playing with that idea of like, they can be a lot of fun at a lot of the film conventions I used to go to. But like, when you have like this kind of like sadness for some people that they're still hoping for something more that they're probably not going to get at a horror film convention. So that was really where I was coming from with writing this story, and then having the sister who's like, I'm good, like we don't need this to be happy, and kind of balancing that of like, and the ambitions of being an artist. It's tough being a writer, it's tough being an actor, it's tough being a filmmaker. So yeah,
we don't. Well, the other sister who doesn't want any part of it, you really feel the emotion of that. You do feel the opposite side of it too. Like you don't feel, I don't feel negatively towards the other character as well. Like you feel very sympathetic towards it, but you do feel that pain. There's a lot, these are really wild and imaginative stories, but every one of them has, what I love about the book is that every one of them has its own emotional center. Particularly this next story, "The Sea Witch of the World's Fair." What a great title! What a great concept. So the concept of this one is we have a real mermaid who's pretending to be a human, pretending to be a mermaid. Like, of course, right? But even on that, like it's set in the 1940s World's Fair in Queens, New York, and I'm a New Yorker, so that was just great to have that setting. And I'm also a child of the MTV generation. So this evoked, I'm not sure if you've seen this video by the band called The Tubes, She's a Beauty. So it evoked, I think they were pulling on that same World's Fair sideshow imagery where it's just like this, Fee Waybill is just this sort of Barker, type character and trying to get people in to see the mermaid sideshow. So I just had that imagery in there. But our character, I guess she's described, she's not quite a Selkie, she's not quite a mermaid, and she's no helpless creature. When the first man tries to attack her, we see that she's capable of just devouring him whole, like right from the start there. And that's only the first of so many cool details. We have a Salvador Dali designed room where her internal dialogue, she's like, this is where I can masquerade as myself. Like, so many great lines. But there's this wonderful, what I like about this story is there's this wonderful sense of melancholy and longing in the main character. And she's, I think the outward side of that is she's, one of the last of her kind. We get the sense that her kind has been devastated by the fishing industry and the military. We don't go too much into that, but I feel like it's a subtle but strong nod to the state of our oceans. And then the real heart of the story is she moves in with her friend Rita. And the theme of the story kicks in, at least for this reader, where it's a universal theme. I think a lot of people can relate to this, where there's a sense that one has to hide your true self in order to fit into a world that would not, whether it's real or perceived, in this case real, who's not going to accept and will not accept the real and unmasked you.
Yes.
And there's a standout line that really showcases, there's also a very neo-noir sensibility to the story. Like, I think she says, before the shit hits the fan, excuse my language, she says, these men thought they understood the world, but they hadn't met me yet. And I'm giving my synopsis because I love these stories. I want to get your feedback in just a second here. But Rita, the friend, witnesses our main character killing the vice agents who have come to shut him down. And she's still, she's horrified that in doing this, that she's going to be rejected by this person she cares for the most. But Rita accepts her, and together they run away to Hollywood, and we get what's as close to a happy ending as Gwendolyn Kiste is ever going to give us. And hooray for mixing it up like that, like it's as close to happy ending as we're going to get. What was it like for you writing like a historically set piece, piece with these noir, neo-noir aspects to it?
Yeah, I like that you picked up the noir aspects because I'm a big noir fan. So like I love like whenever you can kind of, because I think noir and horror are so close in a lot of ways anyways, kind of dark shadowy corners and bad things happening. And so like I really love that about the connection between them. So I was thinking of that because this was the era when noir was so popular in the cinema. And I was just so excited when I found out that Salvador Dali had this Birth of Venus exhibit at the World's Fair.
Amazing, right?
Yeah, it's this weird fun house, and it was so cool. And so I was so excited to write about it. And there were girls that were dressed up like mermaids, kind of swimming around. And I, of course, then thought, well, what if there was a real mermaid, but she was trying to be a person, and now she could be like a mermaid in front of everyone and, actually get paid for it. And that was really where the story went. And yeah, it is such a story about identity and about being accepted for who you are. And that's such a huge part of it. She is masquerading as herself, as she says at one point, and wants to be accepted. So that was like such a huge part of writing this story and exploring this world.
And so, and it's no small trick that you pulled up. It's so, it feels so smooth. It feels so elegant that you slipped in like a happy ending in there, which I think is important because I'm a big proponent of like, the happy ending like ruins what would otherwise be such a good story. But in this case and in this context, it feels good because when I'm looking at all these stories as a whole, we're getting that theme is a recurring theme of acceptance of self, of identity and masking. And it's good to have one and be like, yeah, sometimes we're just going to have to destroy the world. Sorry. And sometimes it's like, yes, sometimes we're going to have to kill the vice agent, but we will find acceptance, even if it's not a pipe dream that we're going to run away for Hollywood. At least stopping the camera at that point, it feels we're really happy for them. Another, I guess we could say it's historical. It's not set now. Is Melting Point, and that one is set in. I'm not sure when it happened, but I remember it. It was my lifetime. The morning of the 3 Mile Island nuclear meltdown. Was that the late 70s, early 1980s?
Yeah, I think it was 78 is what's coming to mind for me. I should know this off the top of my head, especially since it happened in Pennsylvania, in my home state. But I believe it was late 70s.
I remember where I was as a kid, just hearing about it. But it's a story of local residents and neighbors, 2 women named Rose and Stephanie. And Rose was out sunbathing when this happened. And Stephanie is her neighbor who's living this life. She's just in fear. There's a violent and abusive husband on the scene, not on the scene, who's just eclipsing her life. And the story starts with Rose gets these radiation burns and asks her neighbor to come over and help. And in the first meeting, she delivers a really poignant line, like when she's being treated. Rose says to Stephanie, "Why do we help and care for these people in this world that doesn't care for us?" And it was the heart of that story, and maybe to me that's the heart of this book in many ways. But then keeping to the four corner, the present scene of the story, Rose's burns evolve into more than just burns, and it becomes necessary that we get the sense, both from her living situation and from the disaster, that she has to leave and go live with her sisters. And the conflict we're getting is, but how can I leave Rose behind? And maybe I shouldn't give too many spoilers. It's such an innovative way. The story takes off in such an innovative place from that. Such an innovative ending. If you could tell us about that ending, but also tell us your thoughts on structure and playing with structure in short fiction, if you would.
Oh, yeah. So I like story in particular with Melting Point is like kind of like my cosmic nuclear horror story. Like it's got cosmic horror, but there's like a nuclear horror aspect to it. And I did my launch last week, and Sarah Tantlinger and I were in conversation, and we were both talking about how like we're fascinated and terrified by nuclear power because it is, and I always say, like, when a nuclear power plant works, it's very clean energy. But when it goes wrong, everything dies. And it's like this really intense thing. And it's like, I feel like only human beings could come up with something that's like, oh, if it works, it's great. But if it's in really bad shape.
And I remember,
yeah, exactly. And it's wild to me. And so I was thinking about how intense nuclear power is and nuclear horror, which we don't have as much now. There was that period of time in like the 60s and 70s when there was a lot more, even in the 50s, a lot more nuclear horror. And anything from Godzilla to, I think you could put the China Syndrome in there. And my husband, Bill, and I were talking about like The Day After, I think was one. Not The Day After Tomorrow, but there was one in the 70s called The Day After. I've never seen it.
That just scarred an entire generation of school children.
That's what he said. He said the exact same thing. He was describing parts of it. And then there was a British movie called Threads. I've never seen Threads, but like I've seen clips of it and it's horrifying. And so it's like there definitely was like nuclear horror for a while, like as part of almost like a genre.
Yeah.
And then there was one I just came across. I think it's called Testament that I had never even heard of, but it like got an Oscar nomination. So there used to be a lot of this, and there's not as much now. And like, but it still scares me a lot. So that was something I wanted to kind of blend with cosmic horror because I actually feel like there's like a there. There's something there to me of like things that are just so far beyond what we can actually control, even if we think we can control it. So that was definitely a big part of this story. And then in terms of structure, I love playing with structure anyhow, but especially in short fiction, because I think you can do a lot in that small framework. You do it in a novel, it can get to be a lot for some people. It can become harder to follow. It can bog itself down. But I think in short fiction,
to sustain it, or short fiction is almost lends itself to the avant-garde and the experimental in terms of at least like going from act 1, act 2, act 3.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so that's something that I always really like doing in my short fiction. And there's definitely a few pieces in here that have that kind of experimental format. There are lists. There's the Sister Glitter Blood, which is as a board game instruction. So there's definitely some things in here that I did that I really enjoyed kind of playing with form.
And for the uninitiated, if you haven't read one of Gwendolyn's stories yet, we say these words like avant-garde or non-standard structure, but that's only because like other people just aren't doing it. They feel so right. Like we're talking about these huge stakes like destroying the world and nuclear angst, but you so elegantly and so organically flip while there's the shadow of nuclear horror in the story. The stakes and the ending are about the two people in this story so perfectly, and that's just what's so great about the story. Let's for a second here. I didn't get a chance to say hello to some of our friends and colleagues. Hello to the people joining us here, and our friend Jacques is talking about destroying the world. We got some comments here about nuclear horror. So hello to everyone watching from home or wherever you are. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate you. We appreciate you coming here to talk about these stories. So yeah, we're running the gambit of types of horror. Here's another great one. Another great title. Her Skin, a Grim. Did I say that wrong? Is it her skin is a grim cat? Her skin a grim. Yes. Her skin a grim canvas.
Yes.
Again, that's what I when I was reading these stories, I loved getting the what I'm calling, I guess, the first glance of this is a story about a girl who's from out of town and she's coming to the big city life and she wants to make it in there. And it's like a setup we've all seen before, but it very quickly it's not the same. And I loved it. Like, oh, this is Gwendolyn's this story or her that story. But yet I know that and there's no crime in it just being like a familiar story. But I'm just like I'm excited for the story, but I'm excited to be like, what's Gwendolyn's take going to be on this one? So of course, like nothing ever, like in all good fairy tales or fables, nothing ever is good for our heroine, and nothing is ever good for our heroine who's just getting off the bus and trying to make it in Hollywood or somewhere else. It never works out. And of course, this young lady, her good fortune, she becomes a fashion designer's muse, and moves into her space, which is this luxurious workspace and home space, but I guess the drawback that comes to it is this designer likes to stitch things on people and on her very quickly. It's become this living mannequin doll. And we get this list of so many more things that are wrong with this perfect situation revealed to us. And the most noticeable is that the past muses are in the back room on ice or in glass, in this glass case. And eventually it becomes our heroine's turn to be like, all right, I guess I'm bored with you. Time for her to go into the glass case. And she just says no, and she rebels. So what's your thoughts on horror as revenge, horror as justice, which may or may not be different than the zeitgeist of revenge horror, or at very least the trope of bad things happening or bad things coming back to bad people, such as a designer.
So again, like the title, like Her Skin a Grim Canvas, I wanted it to sound kind of poetic and feel like a fairy tale, and like have that kind of fairy tale feel right from the start. So, you know, when you're going in that that's what it is, because it is a Bluebeard retelling. It's basically Bluebeard as a fashion designer. And so, yeah, so I, a Bluebeard story before, and I felt like, okay, yeah, this is a perfect like place to kind of play with that. And I do think very often that, you know, muses are, people know like, oh, that person was, you know, so and so's muse, but, you know, we don't often want to get inside the head of those people. And this is kind of like going off on a tangent, but not entirely. I remember when Patty Boyd, who was like the muse of like George Harrison and Eric Clapton, I remember when her memoir came out. This was like 15 years ago or something now. And like my husband bought it for me for Christmas. And it was like the greatest gift because I was so excited to read from her perspective, because it felt like she had been somebody who like everybody knew, oh, you know, Wonderful Tonight and Layla's about her and Something and these classics, but I wanted to hear from her. And so to me, that's always been a thing. Like, I want to hear from those people that are right there in history that have influenced art, but don't ever get the credit for it, even though, you know, she was right there. She was a model. So you know, and a lot of times modeling isn't even considered an art form, even though it is. That's as much of an art form as the art itself. And a lot of times models get kind of pushed aside as just being vapid or empty. And I wanted to kind of play with that a little bit in this as well. So yeah, this one was a really fun one to write, like, even though it's very dark. And like you said, there's like these aspects of like, you can recognize, oh, this person, and they're just trying to make it, and then it goes very badly. But I thought it would be such an interesting way to incorporate fairy tales into like the modern day.
Yeah, well said. I mean, I was going to pass over the story because we've talked about it before, but I think it's right to mention the 8 people who murdered me. Again, Lucy isn't. I mean, she's such a real person in our pantheon, but it fits into the theme of the overlooked, of the secret history, of the history of the overlooked, of you know, often, you know, of the overlooked heroine or the overlooked female character, and that's another recurring theme in your work that is just done to such great effect that we Her Skin a Grim Canvas is we would definitely categorize it as one of those to great effect. Followed by Last Video Store on the Left, which somehow goes hand in hand. You know, I wasn't. This is just a question to Echelon here. A question that just came to me. Like, I know this is a collection, so these were all being written for, I think, either anthologies or calls. But how much do themes like how much of the themes or the sequencing in the book when did you sequence it? Did your editor sequence it? How much of the themes between one story and another were in your mind when writing it, or not at all, or when sequencing?
Yeah, so I think I sequenced it. I know I had chosen an original sequence. I'm trying to remember if we changed any. I don't think so. Love that you brought it up with this story, because the last video store on the left, obviously that's the reference,
right?
On the left is one of the 3 new ones. So this one was written specifically for this collection. There are 13 previously published, and then 3 new ones. And this is what are
the other 2 ones? I know this, but let's hear them for refresh my memory.
Yes, so it's Last Video Store on Best Friends Forever, and then Lost in Darkness and Distance, the Marie Antoinette meets Mary Shelley one. So yeah, those are the 3 new ones. And in particular with Last Video Store on the Left, I had wanted to kind of write something that was about a video store for a while, and I'd had this idea of like the last video store being the focus. And then when I went to start putting together the collection, I realized there were some themes with like storytelling and with film. And so it was like, okay, I already had this idea. I hadn't written it completely yet, but I had some notes, and it was like, this was going to be a perfect place for the story to really fit in with the overall theme. So that that one was one, I think it was the last one I finished. I'm trying to remember. It was either this one or Lost in Darkness and Distance, because I'd had Best Friends Forever for a little while, and also realized that like it hadn't been published yet. And I realized like, okay, I really like the idea of friendship and themes and kind of toxic relationships, because I think that's something that fits in very well here, and kind of like the doubling. There's a lot of doubles in my work. I find doubling very fascinating, like something like in Bergman's Persona or Black Swan. I love the idea of having two people that are like reflections of each other. It's even weird when you actually see that with people, like either siblings or friends or something, when you can actually see this in life sometimes, of like two people who are very similar but almost like reflect the worst in each other.
Choir, right? For those of us who look at life as story, when you're like, wait a minute, there are two people in my life. I mean, I tend not to be a self-centered person, but sometimes it's like, all right, there's people aren't lessons, people are their own lives. But sometimes when you look at that and you're like, wait a minute, why is life looking like a story? And when your life looks like a horror story, then but yeah, last video store on the left is right, like of course that you like, it makes so much sense that you would write it really it makes so much sense now hearing that that's an original to the collection, because it's such a vehicle to hold so many of your themes, right down to Callie is our main character, and Jackie is a supporter coming in to do an article on the last video store, at least in the state. And when they go out for a drink, there's a great line. I think Jackie says to Callie, like, she's like, "You're like a ghost," and it's like it's perfect, and it starts to tie into the title, the haunted houses she calls her own. So it's like this video store is its own kind of haunted house. So I just love that little aspect. They go back to Callie's place, and of course they watch Eraserhead, where it's like, if there's any doubt whose story we're in, what world we're in there. And then if there's any other doubt, I'm being humorous about it, but it's like the very heavy and very serious themes that are carried in here. Like, yeah, Callie's a person whose family is not accepting of her, and she is like this ghost because she's sort of like hiding from this world, and this reporter is like sees her, or has like found her, and like the theme again of not only the world not seeing you and not accepting you, but your family. These things go right to it. So I think we do at least get a happy ending, or at least the possibility of a happy ending for these two people. But before that, tell us, if you would, or if you can, what happens to Callie's family? I guess because we didn't mention the video store has these shadowy aspects to it, and we learned that this is something to do with Callie. Tell us, before we get our happy ending, who gets an unhappy ending in this?
Spoiler again. Yeah, so it really is about, her kind of taking refuge in film, especially horror film. And like at the same time, like there's these shadowy figures she sort of sees around her all the time that have been there, that are like, she's not really sure all their intentions. Maybe they're protecting her, maybe they're not. And, and then her family shows up, and then the shadowy figures and her family meet for the first time. So
they're such cool ghosts too. Like, it's such a great take, because like sometimes, like, you hear like the real life ghost stories. Oh, there was a shadow. There was a shadowy figure, and I'm like, oh, kill me now. Like, oh God, But like you took like such a potentially trite element and made it into something so so powerful and so effective in the story. Moving on, again, another genre, and it makes sense that you said you and Sarah were talking about your nuclear fears at your in-person book launch, but I think that plays out, like, we get there's a lot of doomsday is on the agenda in this book. We get a lot of doomsday. And it's great because like a lot of doomsday we get post-apocalyptic worlds, and I like that a lot. But we rarely get like the lead up to. Often it's like that's like
Mhm.
sort of the backstory, or it's just there. It's like,
Mhm.
yeah, the world ended, and here we are. We're getting a lot of this next one, which is called Ides, is like the
Yes.
Doomsday Cult, which is like
Mhm.
the lead up
Mhm.
to the apocalypse, and it's almost like, but so much better. It's almost like the Groundhog's Day of a doomsday cult. Like we have this our main character is Bristol, and her sisters and other acolytes are like,
Mhm.
hey, maybe we need to kill our doomsday leader. And so again, it would be the setup itself. This is just the setup. The setup would still be a very satisfying story on its own. Like, yeah, what if the acolytes think that we should kill the leader? And they do. But then they're like, wait a minute, she comes back, so we have to kill her again. And it's like this wonderfully freaky, fascinating conceit, to like, oh, you're like, oh, it was a doomsday cult, and we tend to dismiss them, but in the world of the story, you're like, wait a minute, there's something happening here, because
Mhm.
the leader just rose from the dead and they're doing it
Yeah.
again. And then of course they begin to doubt, like, wait a minute, what if we fucked it up? Like, the doomsday shit's happening, the biblical places, the water's running red, the doomsday shit's happening, and the townspeople are now against us. So like I saw themes. It's great because I saw some similar themes, but then also like subverting your themes. It's like, okay, new beginnings,
Mhm.
acceptance, but there's also the theme of like destruction. It's
Yeah.
like new
Yeah.
beginnings, it's gonna be okay, but also the theme of destruction is there, and I love that. So this is an interesting structure, the way I was looking at it. We've talked about the structure of, hey, bad people getting their just cause, bad things happening to bad people.
Mhm.
Although it's debatable, I saw the story as like bad things happening to good people. Like, let's
Mhm.
say the acolytes I was viewing them as like I was with them, at least morally. I'm like,
Ah.
hey, I'm with them.
Mhm.
And so like they're the good people, they're the good guys, they're the good women, and bad things are happening to them. And we won't say specifically, but let's just say, like, yeah, it doesn't go right for them. And so there's no redemption for them. So like this was the structure of the story was so bleak to me. It's like, hey, even if like you have your challenge and you overcome your challenge and you do what's right, and the universe just shuts you down.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
that's why I was going to ask you if you'd seen the film Bugonia, but we can skip
Oh.
that. I'll just recommend that. I'll go to this story raises a question for me. Does this story raise the question? Should we even be saved at all?
And then she sort of asks at the end, like it's kind of like this was just destined to happen to a certain degree. Yeah. So this one was for Shakespeare Unleashed. So it was a take on Julius Caesar. And I didn't want to do any of like the typical, like I didn't want to do Hamlet. I didn't want to do Romeo and Juliet, mostly because I had really been into those when I was younger. Like I knew the famous to be or not to be speech like as a 12-year-old and performed it at the talent show. So I was
Mm,
really into Shakespeare. And so I wanted to do one that I'd read, but wasn't quite as like connected to so that I could like try something different. And I thought, well, what about an all-female Julius Caesar? And what
okay.
what if it was apocalyptic? Because in some ways, that time period in real life almost feels apocalyptic. It was such a point in time with Julius Caesar. And so from there, that's really how it grew of like, I always felt bad for Julius Caesar, kind of, when, that he was betrayed, but at the same time, he wasn't a good leader. So it was like, but as a kid, I remember when I read it, it was like, oh, yeah, but like all his friends or all the people he thought were his friends turn on him. And so, like, I always had a lot of empathy for him, like when I was young. I think now I'm like, Julius Caesar was not a good person, but like
Right.
as a kid, you like
I can see
humanize
that though. I can
people
see that. Like, what a poor cult leader. She did everything a cult leader's supposed to do. She had a fenced-in compound. She had all these great acolytes, and what do? They kill her, and she rises from the dead to be like, no, and they kill her again. For Julius Caesar, aka oh, now I'm seeing it because her name was Julia, the cult leader. Okay. I'm seeing the story with totally new and delightful eyes. Delightfully pointed, stabby eyes.
Stabby eyes. I love it. Yeah. So it's like, hey, we don't actually want the end of the world. That's not what we really came here to do. And then, but one by one, things keep happening to them as well, which is exactly what happens in Julius Caesar. Like nobody ends up happy in Julius Caesar. Like I always remember being sad because all the women have meet terrible ends. I think there's really only the two in Julius Caesar. I think there's Portia and my gosh, I just had her name. It's that, oh my gosh, like what's it? Calpurnia, I think is the other character. Yeah.
But
yeah.
So
I just had it and then I was like, what is it? It's some name that you never hear almost anywhere else. But yes, so it was like, and that was another one that like growing up, I was like, oh, the female characters do not get, much center stage in Julius Caesar. So it felt like the right one to like gender swap everything. So yeah.
What a cool way of looking at that one. Come, you know what? Like, if you do ever watch the film Bugonia, let me know. I'd love to hear your take on it as relates to this story.
Okay.
The last one. I think we have time for one more, but it's a great topic. It's In the Belly of the Wolf, and this is such a poetic story. It starts with the line. I think it starts with the line, or very near the beginning of the story, we have, and she would have loved you too, if only the moon would have allowed it. Look, all the themes that we're talking about are present in here, but I want to talk about the fairy tale itself. Like, that operated for me. It didn't, when you see Once Upon a Time, it's a cue for certain expectations. And if you're people like you and I, who've read our Angela Carter and we read Artanithly, that expectation is fairy tales. At the very least, the world is a dangerous place for everyone, particularly our heroines. And it rarely, if ever, ends well for the women in these stories. Right from Tanithly's take on the Princess and the Pea, I think she changes it to the Princess and the Pit. I think it just comes right out and saying, like, it never ends well for the princess, dear reader. But I wanted to ask you how you feel about that, but I'm just going to change gears because beforehand when we were talking about what movies we'd seen, I recently saw, and let's see, did I screw up the title? Criterion, it's on the Criterion Channel, Valerie and Her Week of Wonders, which is a lot of things, but it does have it's got a lot going on in there, but it also does have some fairy tale. It's definitely got fairy tale imagery and some fairy tale stuff going on in there. What was your take on that? I'd love to just hear your two cents. Maybe if it pointed, how does it relate to fairy tales, and maybe how did it influence some of the people that came after that film?
Yeah. So the reason I think I had of it, but the reason I really sought it out was because I'd heard that it really heavily influenced Angela Carter and The Bloody Chamber. And so I was like, okay, I've got to see this because I'm being influenced by Angela Carter. So I want to know
what The Bloody Chamber written. Did it come first? Did Valerie and The Week of Wonders come first?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. By a few years.
That is fascinating to hear. Because okay.
Because it was in the mid 70s, I think.
I think it was 71. I think it was 71 when it.
That's what I would have said. Yeah, it was either early to mid 70s. Yeah, and The Bloody Chamber didn't come out till the 80s. So yeah, it definitely predated it. So yeah,
that makes perfect sense. I feel like Angela Carter is so iconic to me. I feel like I was thinking the other way around. I'm like, oh, this is so this is such an Angela Carter type thing, but this in itself, I learned, was based on in a much older book. So it's like, okay, it's seeing Angela Carter tapping in to this zeitgeist of like the dark and dangerous fairy tale. Yeah, and I think Valerie and Her Week of Wonders does such a great job of incorporating that darkness into fairy tales, because there's like vampires and there's blood and there's witch hunts. At one point, like, she's tied up to be like burned at the stake, but she's just like sticking her tongue out at the people burning her. Like, it's like, it's got this like
and scary at times, like unsettling, but at the same time, like it's whimsical. And so it's such an interesting, very dreamlike, very stream of consciousness. It doesn't have
Yeah.
necessarily a super discernible plot, but that is fine. I like
Yeah.
David Lynch's
It's
stuff.
there. It's there. It's just not
Yeah,
linear, but
exactly.
it's there, and I
Mhm,
appreciate it even more for its presentation that way.
mhm,
I watched
mhm.
the movie and I immediately was saying like, "Oh my God, I'm not a film school guy, so I didn't go to film school. I didn't. I mean, I wish I had, but I'm watching this movie. I'm like, wow, all the directors that I like, I
Mhm.
bet they watch this movie because I'm seeing.
Uh-huh.
I was seeing like, wow, like I'm seeing bits like, oh, Ridley Scott lifted this stuff from Legend. Like there's
Yeah,
some
I could see
imagery,
that.
and like I
Mhm.
could see like a lot of. I feel like a lot of yeah, like Neil Jordan and his
Yes.
Angela Carter adaptations. I'm like,
Mhm, mhm,
a
mhm,
lot of these films, these genre films, I feel like they watched it and were trying to
mhm,
incorporate
mhm.
that into there.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So I guess the last question I'll have is about fairy tales. Like nothing ever ends well for our heroines in there. But no, if I'm changing the question by thinking about Valerie and Wicked Wonders as a modern fairy tale,
Mhm,
where Valerie doesn't. She's definitely goes through some really bad shit, but it doesn't. She doesn't. It doesn't end. It ends in an ambiguous note, which even pleases me
yeah.
even more. So it doesn't end terribly for her.
Huh.
But what I liked about this movie is that um, it was such a female centric
Mhm,
movie so organically. And my question I
mhm,
was going to ask, I was going to say, oh, with fairy tales being the cautionary tale where beware it never ends well for our heroines. And I was going to say, is horror the new fairy tale in that regard? But I'll say, is horror the new fairy tale where we can it's just a vehicle for telling
mhm.
stories that may or may not have been overlooked as they
Yeah.
should.
Yeah, I feel like that's a really good way of thinking about it, of that connection of like fairy tales and horror and like just telling stories and trying to reclaim different aspects of who we are as people. So yeah, very much. I really like that. I really like that idea.
If you like that idea, if you like those notions, check out the haunted houses. She calls her own. It's such a great collection of stories. I think we're going to wrap it up there. A couple of plugs. Coming up on this program, if it is a program, May 18th, we have Steve Tem as our guest. June
Oh,
18th, Kathy Koja. July
ooh,
9th, Joshua Ginsburg. And I think I'm allowed to talk about this coming up in New Orleans in October. I think you're going to be at Horror Reader Weekend, and I think I'm going to be
yes.
there too, with some
Yay!
great authors like John Paget. So I look forward
Yes.
if you can make it down to New Orleans in October for Horror Reader Weekend. Those are some
Yeah.
things on my mind. What's on your mind? What do you got going on for the book, and what's going on in
Yeah.
your world before we take off?
Yeah, so this Wednesday I'm going to be at the Doylestown Bookshop, and then on that's in Doylestown outside of Philadelphia, and then on Thursday I'm going to be at Karis Books in Atlanta, and then next week I'm going to be at the Twisted Spine in NYC.
Oh
I'm very
well,
excited. Yeah. Yeah, that's going to be my first time there at that bookshop, which is so cool.
that's
And then
exciting.
next month I'll be at Mysterious Galaxy in San Diego, and then StokerCon in June, and then New Orleans in October. So lots
Oh
of stuff
my,
going
what
on.
what a fantastic agenda. Thank you so much, Gwendolyn. All the best for the book. We'll see you
Thank
again
you.
in the show sometime. And thank you for joining us, and everyone listening and joining us. Thank you so much, and have a great one. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Ending the stream now.